to the inaugural episode of Tactics and Tentacles, tactical tabletop role playing game Battlefield Survival, in which I, the Dungeon Master, will teach you or help you learn to apply small unit tactics to your tabletop games in order to survive. The genesis of this project was watching the players in my ongoing Age of Worms campaign repeatedly get their asses handed to them after usually making a series of bad tactical decisions. And then in one session in which I kind of walked them through a few recommendations, they absolutely killed it. And I was so proud of them. To establish my bona fides, I am not just some role playing game nerd. I am a retired Army officer. I served in the Army for 30 years, 20 of them as a military intelligence officer, 10 of them as enlisted. So I do know a little bit about what I'm speaking here. I'm going to recommend anybody who's interested in really getting into the nitty gritty and understanding about the basics of small unit tactics to check out B.A. Friedman's On Tactics, a theory of victory in battle. It's an excellent guide, and B.A. is a great guy if you follow him on Twitter. Just absolutely wonderful. I'll have to let him know that I gave him a shout out. But I consulted this and putting together this first segment. So for this first segment, we are going to review a awesomely victorious battle by my Age of Worms players that they just did a couple weeks ago. And this is the one where I helped walk them through. So we switch over to the battle map and begin with setting the scene. So for those who aren't familiar, Age of Worms is an old 3.5 campaign run by, published in Dungeon Magazine in the early 2000s. It's a 12 module series, a lot of fun, very tough. In this particular setting, the players were raiding a Mind Flayer's lair. Surprise was not on the player's side because they had unknowingly triggered a couple of alarms, but this ended up working to their advantage, and I'll explain why. And it has to do with tempo. So when the players entered the lair proper, they were spotted by this brain statue here, which sent a mental alert to the Mind Flayer, who then told his minion what was going on. At that point, they started laying buff spells on themselves. Now, the players fought a couple creatures in here, which I'd actually moved out of this main battle space here, and I'll explain why in a moment. They fought a couple creatures in here, then they went around here and messed around for a while, and that actually gave them enough time for those buff spells to wear off. So they reached this point in which they knew that going around to the north, this pathway that leads from the northeast around, would likely lead to the final confrontation with the Mind Flayer. Now, they were fully expecting to get beat down by this. Their original plan was to just chug down this hallway, which is a 5-foot wide corridor, tumble into this room, and start flailing. At this point, I said, hey, guys, there may be another way. Did you explore through here? And I'm going to ping right here. Did you explore through this area right here? No, they hadn't. So they're all stacked up here, and they decide to go ahead and, we'll send a couple guys down and take a look. So one of them, and I can't remember which one because I've moved all the icons around by then in order to help demonstrate this more clearly. One of them went down here and, whoops, I guess it would help if I'm on the right layer, wouldn't it? Objects and tokens layer. There we go. One of them went down here and explored and discovered that here, overlooking where the Mind Flayer's main lair was, is a balcony overlooking this space. This is a domed area, roughly 45 feet across, with a dome that is 60 feet high, and this balcony is about 40 feet off the ground. Now, my fellow military members will be thinking, ooh, that's a good place to do a support by fire position. Or, alternatively, it's a good place to do an attack by fire position. So, they got what they call their shooters together. Basically, any of their party whose primary attacks are at a distance. That included Toradol, who is a warlock and well known for using her Eldritch Blast on literally everything. Halflet Moon, who is a ranger and is very fond of shooting things with the Half Moon bow. And Stavros, who is a fighter but very fond of using a composite bow. Nod Diamondback went with them. Now, that was a bad decision by their part. Nod Diamondback is their cleric. And probably wasn't the best idea to put their main medical support with a supporting position. So, these guys went down here. And then they got a real moment of genius in which they decided to set up a order of battle, basically a rotational plan, because this is only like a 5-foot wide opening here. I told them they could get 2 shooters in there at once. So they quickly, on the fly, actually Bernard the Bard was up there with them too. They quickly, on the fly, worked up a quick plan of, rotating people through that 5-foot opening. Now, people who are familiar with 3.5 know that even during a full combat action, a full attack action, you still get a 5-foot step. So they would attack, take their 5-foot step, rotate out of that doorway, and then the next person would attack. Thus ensuring that everybody could attack during each round. Now, Mateo Vildar, who is a paladin of vast repute, and Rogi Bloody Thumb, who is a tank-like ranger, dwarven ranger, I should point out, made the frontal attack towards, and I've never figured out how to pronounce it. It's got way too many vowels, but the Mind Flayer and the Mind Flayer's minion, who was a drow priestess of Loth, who was under his thrall. Now, what the players didn't realize is that this drow priestess had been a opponent of theirs earlier on, who had escaped using Rod, Spanish Tercio tactics, very similar, yes. A mix of, for those who don't know, the Spanish Tercio was the origin of the regimental system in Europe, in which a mix of pikes and muskets, actually I think back at the originals there were still arquebuses, were in a combined arms formation in order to maximize the effectiveness of both weapon systems. It allowed the Tercio to be a dominant formation on the battlefield in early modern Europe for, I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've studied the Tercio. But as I recall, they did the Spanish did use them in the campaigns in the Netherlands. Thanks for that point, Rod. Now where was I? Okay, so Rogi and Mateo, they come chugging through, and they are going to serve as a fixing force. Their purpose is to attract and grab the attention of God, I love fantasy names. Miranis and Zerzog. Think of it as a fighting in a darkened room. You can't see. And I should also point out this analogy came from either J.F.C. Fuller or who was the other one? The other British theorist. I think it was J.F.C. Fuller who came up with this analogy. You're fighting in a darkened room. You can't see. You have an opponent. So you're walking through the room blind, and you're reaching out with one hand. You can't see what's going on. But you find somebody. You find your opponent. Your fingers brush against them. What do? You grab them and hang on to them. And then unleash that right you got cocked up back here. Okay, somebody's going to argue with me. No, you're a boxer. You should be jumping and moving. Well, it's a dark room. You can't see the guy. Anyway, but that was the idea. They are the probing element. They're the frontal attack that's going to fix the attention and capabilities of those two foes. And then our heroes up here are going to attack into the flank by fire. So it is a something of an envelopment, but really what they're doing is establishing an attack by fire position in order to bring fire onto the flank. Now, they've got two huge advantages. One, they're behind the big bad evil guys. Two, as I said earlier, they wasted so much time earlier on that the buffs on the bad guys wore off. So the bad guys were at a lower power level, lower capability than they would have had earlier on in this fight. And finally, they are at an elevated position. They cannot be engaged directly. Now, I had assumed before this fight that this would be a one hellacious fight. I had assumed they were going to be in for a set piece battle like they'd never seen before. It turned out that using these tactics by Rogi and Mateo fixing them, and then they unleashing some very, very powerful fire support from here, they killed both of these big bad evil guys in 2 rounds. Now, there was some lucky rolling going on there, but they most definitely just, they were in the right position. They were attacking from 2 directions. The monster's attention was divided, and they really couldn't do much other than just, the monsters couldn't do much other than face these guys and then just get torn up from here. It happened so quickly that some of the tactics I had planned for the monsters to use were ineffective. My original plan was, if they came through this corridor, for Miranus, the Drow Priestess, to cast Greater Darkness again, which had proved extraordinarily effective on these guys earlier. Zerzog, being a Mind Flayer, although he sees, most of his attacks are psionic in nature, so he would be able to sense the humans or the adventurers' presence and attack them regardless. Didn't work out that way for me at all, because basically they got their asses kicked badly. Again, some really good rolling on the part of the players, but a few things that I want to really point out here. This is like standard squad level tactics, right? You gain and maintain contact with the opponent, with your foe, with your enemy. And then you send an element around to maneuver to a position where they can attack from a flank. It's standard. It's a battle drill. It worked out great for these guys. They hadn't planned it ahead of time. They hadn't thought of it ahead of time. So this brings me up to one of my next points. Have a plan. If you are a player in an RPG, work with your other adventurers and have some basic battle drills that you planned out. Hey, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. It doesn't have to be complex. It can be relatively simple, much like this one. Another a huge advantage the players had was they actually took the time, after some prompting from me, to go ahead and do the reconnaissance to figure out what the best routes were and what the situation they were going to be facing is. If they hadn't conducted that reconnaissance and discovered that there was another path into the room that would have left a great attack by fire position, then they would have gotten schwacked. If you can imagine, all these bubbas coming through this 5-foot-long corridor trying to tumble into this room. Oh, darn it, there's greater darkness right in front of us. We have once again failed to show up with a Dispel Magic in tow. They would have been stumbling around in the dark, and greater darkness, as you guys know, is impervious to all forms of vision, including dark vision. And except for the caster, Zurzog wouldn't have cared because, as I said, he could just psionic blast them with his mental domination powers, and Marinus could see through it anyway. She would have been wailing on him with her +1 Morning Star of head smashing. He would have been mind blasting them into nothingness, and I would have once again been chuckling away as the dungeon master who got a total party kill. Alas, I didn't get a total party kill. So these guys did great. I was really proud of them. A couple basic terms I want to go through here. Again, using B.A. Friedman's On Tactics. B.A., I will send you a bill for my pushing of your book. So we talk a lot about the basic principles of war in the Army. At least those of us who are of an intellectual bent do. And one of the basic principles is maneuver. And that's what I've been describing here. Maneuver is the act of physically moving on the battle space in order to bring effects upon the enemy. Right? Now, those effects can be literal effects, or they can be some form of dislocation, for instance. And by dislocation, I mean moving to a position where the enemy's activities are moot. Say a turning movement in which you bypass the enemy's front line or their positions and end up on a piece of terrain that they needed, but now no longer hold because you kind of moved on to it, thus rendering their battle position irrelevant. I should have bookmarked this earlier, but stuff at my civilian job got in the way. So, I talked about I was going to actually touch it. I talked about Rogi Mateo's Frontal Attack. This, as BA notes, is a great technique to fix or tie down an enemy while another force attacks from a different direction. It is, as he puts it, an attack directed at the enemy's front. And that's exactly what they did. Now, I called this an attack by fire position, and it is an attack by fire position, but it was an attack by fire position done as a flanking attack, which is another form of maneuver that BA notes. When those two techniques are combined, you end up with a force, an enemy force, which is attacked from two sides and is incapable of reacting in time. Now, I am going to wrap up this first episode with that. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Next week, I will walk through another one of their battles that didn't go quite so well. And as a teaser, I will say their issue was they failed to gain and maintain contact with the enemy. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm going to be doing this on a weekly basis. And each show will last between 15 and 30 minutes, a short show. But I really think that if you apply these basic small unit tactics in the multi-domain battle space of counter-monster warfare, your players, your adventurers, will succeed bringing effects to all their bad guys. So thank you so much. I enjoyed this, and now I have to go do some civilian work, unfortunately. So I will talk to you guys later, and thanks again. Good night, or good morning, rather.